iZombie episode 9, Patriot Brains. I love this episode. I thought it had a lot of great moments in it. Before I actually did this review, I had a rare chance to actually sit and find the thumbnail I was going to use before doing the review. And it was actually a little tough trying to figure out what should I pick from this episode, because it was like one shot I was going to do was going to be Liv, kind of in her paintball uniform, which was like just a cool little shot, and it was obviously Liv, the main character. But I kind of had to go with what was either, like, I don't know, it was kind of tied for first. It was either the biggest moment or second biggest moment of this episode. And that was Major having taken down the Candyman, temporarily at least. And, you know, as it still, it looks kind of weird because it's like he's just about to throw up. But that scene altogether was an amazing part of this episode. And it was a huge moment for his character, and it was kind of funny that once again it seemed like he was going to get beat up in this episode, but he actually did fight back in this one, and I enjoyed that. He got, you know, his couple of hits, but he didn't get his fingers broken and things like that, which is good, because it's a comment someone put on my last video is that it seems like he's just going to get beat up a bunch, and that's going to kind of push him towards like zombie killer mode, which I still think is definitely the case, because I think he's going to be driven more to find these kids and find out the truth rather than he just gets beat up all the time, fortunately. But I still think he's definitely headed down that path, and he had his first real experience, and it was a great moment. It also kind of led to a little bit of lore being shown where he actually did shoot the zombie in the head, and he still survived that. And initially, my interpretation is that when zombies get shot in the head, even in the show, they died, like full on, they were dead, because Blaine did that to like his two little henchmen. And he had like the other two guys, like the two guys he uses now, he had them on ice. And I thought it was just he shoots people, or he shoots zombies in the head, and then he kind of freezes them, because it's like, I'm not just gonna drag this dead body away right now. So he put him in the freezer, and then he would get rid of them a little later. But we find out, based on what Major did in this episode, zombies being shot in the head does not kill them permanently. It takes them down for a while, at least. Like, apparently it takes them down for quite a while, because Major had the time to not only leave his room, but he had the time to call Clive and, you know, let him in the house and everything before he knew he was gone. So he was out for quite a while, because I would have to assume Major was at least going up and down the stairs, you know, looking in the room before he took off. And, you know, that kind of shows that kind of the other really huge moment at the end of this episode with Lowell and Blaine probably isn't as permanent as Liv currently thinks it is. Like, Lowell is going to be either, I don't know if he's going to be frozen, or if Blaine will really get rid of him like he did with the girlfriend, because it's a little bit different. It's not like his henchman who he can, you know, it's like, oh, I'm going to teach you a lesson and do that. But at the same time, this is someone who is really famous, and is like, he's very well known. If he just ends up going missing, it would be a lot more, you know, it would be a lot different compared to the woman that he killed off beforehand. It's like it would have a bit of an effect. Like, he works for this huge company, which obviously is very involved in the zombie thing, which I don't think Blaine knows at the moment. But, you know, he's obviously involved with this big company. He's a musician and all this other stuff. So I don't know if he's really gonna kill him off like he did with the other woman. I think he might actually end up freezing him to try to teach him a lesson and figure out, like, why the heck did you try to kill me? Because obviously it kind of seemed like it came out of nowhere for him after excuse me, after they're having, like, you know, their little jam session and all that stuff. So I'm not sure how it's gonna play out. Hopefully it's not a permanent end, and he does decide to freeze him and at least teach him a lesson, because that kind of gives like a tiny sliver of hope that he can come back or be saved somehow. So I hope that that's how that ends up playing out. Otherwise, I would kind of suck to see him get killed off. But it was a pretty interesting ending for the episode, without a doubt. I mean, you know, Liv, probably halfway through, decides she wants to kill Blaine because she found out all this stuff where he's killing all these kids to feed a bunch of different zombies and make money. And when she gets to that moment, her brain kind of takes over compared to the soldier's brain, and, you know, she was herself, and it was just like she knew that she couldn't kill him because she would just be a killer. And that kind of pissed off my girlfriend. She was really mad at that situation. But it does make sense. I do wish she shot him too, but it also would have been like, well, they killed the villain. Temporarily at least, because they still could have had it where she shot him and, he was out for a little bit, because I'm assuming neither Lowell or Liv, we haven't seen get shot in the head. So neither of them would have known he would have come back anyway. They would have been like, all right, he's dead. And then he would have woke up like with both of them over him like, oh. And then that, would have been a pretty different ending. But instead, Lowell gets killed off, or at least shot in the head. And Liv is going to have to deal with that throughout the next episode and figure out, what's going to happen. Because if he does randomly come back and because he, kind of learned his lesson or whatever from Blaine, then she'll realize that zombies can't die and it wouldn't have worked on him anyway. But I think that would have been a really interesting ending. And I think that's kind of why they didn't do that, because it's like they gave us the answer, like if he gets shot in the head, he won't die. So it kind of makes you think like, oh, he'll get shot and they'll think they succeeded and then something else will happen. But instead of any of that happening, Liv decides that she's not going to do it at all. And Lowell decides to take over her mission. And unfortunately that fails really quick. Like Blaine was like block and then boom, here's a handgun in your face. So who knows how that stuff's going to play out. He probably will end up killing him off, unfortunately. But I do hope that that's how they write it, where it's like he can't just kill the guy off because, he's a really famous musician and people know where he lives and things like that. So I'm hoping, like, that's my little bit of hope to kind of keep his character in the show, because I do like him, despite Liv's disagreements with him in this episode, and him not asking questions as to where the brains came from and things like that, which Robbie had a really great point. Like, would you want to know? Like, it's one of those things, is like you just have to, you want to believe that he's telling the truth. Excuse me. And they just come from, a funeral home and things like that. And he has, in this episode, he actually does dig up a body. And, he really deals with that. And I thought that was a great moment in the episode, too, where he talks about attending this person's funeral and seeing like how this guy was a teacher. A lot of his students were there, and his daughter read his favorite sonnet from Shakespeare, and his wife, he said, was like living hell on earth. And I thought that was just a really great moment for his character and him dealing with that, because they haven't, even with Liv, it's just like, her job, where she sees these people who died and they're just a case, especially for the show, because everyone got murdered that she tends to work on, it seems. Or at least the ones, we get to see. But for him, it was like, it wasn't just a dead guy. He went to his funeral, and outside of that, he, just pays for these brains that come randomly. And, he even mentioned that he didn't get, like, all these different visions like she did. And of course, he doesn't go looking for them. And, he got one at the end of the episode, which was also something that I thought was really cool. And I never even thought of it, although it's super obvious. But if two zombies eat the same brain, they can get the same visions. So we got to see the vision of Jerome being killed twice in this episode. And I just thought that was a cool concept where, two different characters got the same vision because they ate the same brain. And like I said, it's obvious that that would happen at some point, but it never really occurred to me like, oh yeah, that, you could do that with like 10 zombies. It would last for like maybe a day, where they have the personality thing, compared to if they ate like half the brain a piece or something. But, a little piece to a bunch of different zombies, and all of them could get the same visions. And it was just something that occurred to me randomly. It was like, maybe that could play a role in a future episode if, something happens. If Ravi, who fortunately in this episode found out the disease can't jump from species to species, if he does end up turning into a zombie in the future, he and Liv can work together, and it's like, all right, you eat one half, I eat the other half, and one thing can trigger you, another thing will trigger me, and we get different visions, and they solve the cases even faster. But I thought it was a great little nod at something that probably wouldn't happen for a long time, because it is just Liv, working by herself at this point. But it's definitely out there now. It's an avenue they can explore. It can happen, even if it's not with Liv, it can happen with Blaine and the people he works with. And maybe even, randomly some of the people he sells to, if any of them happen to become important. Which in this episode, one of them certainly did, considering he wants the brain of an astronaut. and so he just writes, who knows how much, probably over $1 million to Blaine so that he can get the brain of an astronaut and kind of live out his dream of being in space. And I love that. I love getting this random guy who's like super rich. He was, if I remember right, a stockbroker. So he's got a bunch of money. He had all these plans. He wanted to be an astronaut. Couldn't exactly do that, but he was able to, he had the chance at least to go to space. He passed the zero-G training. And then, as he puts it, Blaine and his, I think he said like gross fingernail, or maybe he just said fingernail. He came along and totally ruined his life. And he's like, I still want that experience, so I'm just going to write you a bunch of money, and you're going to go kill this astronaut and give me his brain. So this character, I think, might become fairly important, and I think it'll be pretty interesting to see if other buyers end up becoming fairly important, because I think, just like with Lowell, you have people who are fairly rich, just like with the woman that Blaine killed off early on. The only people we've seen are people that are extremely rich, or they're either working in business or really rich, or they just happen to get a really great trust fund, stuff like that. And we haven't seen the more desperate side of things just yet, where someone reaches that end point where they run out of money. And I think that's going to be coming up. And I'm sure Blaine will end up just totally killing that person. But I think that's something that they're kind of working towards, because everyone so far that we've actually seen buying from them has been completely rich. Like, every single person has been like an upper class person, musician, and then a guy who had enough money to buy the first commercial flight into space. That's not cheap. So everyone's been like really high class, super rich people. Everyone in this episode was really, even the main case was like, the guy who died, his wife married this dude, and they had like the craziest looking house. It looked really cool. It's like, something about it just looked really interesting. I like the houses, obviously huge, but we haven't seen any sort of poor clients or middle class clients who are struggling to buy the brains. So I think that's something that might come up fairly soon. I think it would be pretty interesting to get that. And then, of course, like I said, we had the case, which I enjoyed in this episode. There was a lot of stuff where it was like, it seemed like it was the kid at one point because of the issues that seemingly he was having. And I was really sure it was going to turn out to be him, even after they were going after the other guy. I was like, well, I don't know what else is going to randomly come up here. And then it's like, well, here are these drones that can have guns on the bottom. And it's like, well, now that makes perfect sense. And so, the other guy gets arrested. The flashbacks they had were actually pretty interesting, because it was like the mom was freaking out because he was attacking the other guy in front of his daughter, so she has a butcher knife and stuff. So I thought, and they do that well in pretty much every episode, but it was really good in this one. It was like, it seemed like it could have been the kid because of the issues. It seemed like it could have been the wife because she was, scared, of the one guy, because obviously he came to the house and attacked the other dude. And then it turns out to be him. The flashback was also funny because he like slapped the guy in the face and he fell on the couch. That shouldn't be funny, but it just looked really funny. Like, me and my girlfriend were laughing at that because he's just like, no, and he just like, it was supposed to be like a punch, but it looked more like a slap, and like he just fell on the couch and then just fell down, and it just looked really funny to us. So I like that. I think the case worked out pretty well. I thought it was pretty cool. It's like, it ends up being, the high-tech person using some really great technology that no one really thought of. It was like, it was a sniper in a tree, and it turns out to be, they find like all this extra stuff, and it's like, well, here you go, drones. So I thought it was cool. I thought it was a nice little ending. The guy taking off, also really hilarious. Like, Clive didn't even move. He was like, the guy took off, he was just like, and he just put the paper down and walked around the corner. Like, he even told, like, they had it zoomed in on the wife, and Clive was in the background. He was blurry, but you could see him. He like put his hand up, like, to stop another cop from even moving. Like, just don't even worry about it. Like, he's not going anywhere. And I just thought that was so funny that the guy took off, and Clive was just like, huh, all right. And he just strolled along, like, let me just put this little piece of paper down. And he just walked around the corner to get to the guy. So I definitely love that, because I think that's the first time we've had that where someone actually did try to take off from them, and it was just like, meh, not gonna happen. So I definitely love the way that it ended, and I think it was pretty cool. But obviously, the case in this episode, I feel like, was a really short story compared to the other ones, and I'm totally fine with that because everything else was really, really important. Like Major almost dying was a huge moment. Like I said, I'd say that was definitely my favorite moment because he just constantly comes up against the Candyman, and this time he actually won. He almost had it like right there, but of course we find out that even being shot in the head doesn't kill these zombies. So they're gonna be coming after him. They know where he lives now. He was trying to find his way to get to them, and they found their way to him for sure. So they have his info now, which is a little bit worrying because they can easily, now that they know exactly who he is, I feel like they're gonna try to find ways like, all right, he beat you this time, let's figure out how to get him. And in the next episode, they may actually be able to connect the fact that he knew Liv, and they'll easily connect it like, hey, that's his roommate who is Ravi, who works with Liv, and that's a really easy connection. Like it's super easy. So it's gonna lead to some interesting stuff. It might not happen in the next episode, but I feel like them leaving him alone for an entire episode would be really weird. So we'll just have to kind of wait and see how it all plays out. But I love this episode. It was a great first step for Major going into like a zombie hunter mode. Next time he needs to make sure he has a loaded clip instead of having a bunch of just bullets in a box, which I didn't think he would have. I was like, oh, this is going to be a cool moment. And it led to exactly what I thought. But they made it really tense when he first ran in. I'm like, he's just going to take the gun out and he's going to go and he's going to shoot this guy and he's going to actually win this fight. And then he goes in and I start freaking out because he's like pouring a box of bullets in his hand and he's freaking out and dropping bullets. And it's like, he has 2 bullets in this clip. There's no way he's about to survive this. But fortunately, he was able to pull it off. So next time, he'll need to keep a loaded clip somewhere. Maybe even keep the gun on him if possible. He bought it illegally, so it's not like he can really just carry it all the time or carry it around. But I'm excited for it to see where they're gonna take his character and what crazy things he's gonna be doing. And like I said, with them having his info now and him being Ravi's roommate, or I guess Ravi being his roommate, they could easily jump from Major back to Liv and say like, oh, we can use this guy to get to her and get these brains and this and that. So it's gonna lead to some big stuff. They may save that for towards the end of the season, but I love this episode. Of course, I want to know what you guys thought about it, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And I, of course, have to ask, the 2 big moments we had, of course, were Major versus the Candyman, and then Blaine shooting Lo in the head at the end of the episode. So out of those 2 moments, I want to know which one was the most shocking to you, which one was your favorite. Also, of course, what do you guys think is going to happen with Lo? Is he going to be killed off? Is Blaine going to teach him a lesson or something? Like, what is going to happen with Lo as well? So it's crazy for me. I'm not 100% sure. The Major stuff, I do think he's just going to keep going towards the zombie hunter thing. He's still going for getting the information on the brains and stuff like that. He used the sort of supplemental thing to his advantage to basically get exactly what he got. I mean, I don't think he was trying to have his house broken into and get, threatened to have his fingers broken. But he was trying to get to them, and that's exactly what he got. He got exactly what he was looking for. So I do think he'll be going sort of the zombie hunter route throughout the season until, of course, he finds out Liv is a zombie. And as far as Lowell, I just hope he's alive. So that's all I can say for that one, but I do want to know what you guys thought about it. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.